For a podcast that calls itself a roguelike podcast, it's only taken us 4 years to finally get to the true and official real roguelikes that actually matter. This time we are talking Moria, Hack, Larn, and Omega. It's worth noting that each one of these could be their own full episode, so if you want to see us or hear us talk more in depth about those, let us know down below, or send in a request to grogpod.zone/request. But first, let's jump into 1983's release of Moria, the very first roguelike. It's also worth mentioning that there's a really great book that has been published that I read through called Dungeon Hacks: How NetHack, Angband, and Other Roguelikes Changed the Course of Video Games by David L. Craddock. This is a great book. It really goes into a deep dive of the history and development and what it was really like. It really puts you in the shoes of 1983 open source game dev at the time / hacking culture. It's a really great insight. I can't do it justice here because otherwise this would be a 6-hour long podcast, as much as I want to do that. But go and check out that book. I'll link it in the show notes down below. But let's continue on with our kind of speed run of what this game is, what it's like, and some community correspondence. Moria, 1983, developed by one Robert Allen Konecki, who was a 25-year-old college student at the University of Oklahoma at the time. And already, this game has a pretty stark departure from the original Rogue, in that it is way bigger. There's so much more stuff going on with it. How long to beat, I think, has this pegged somewhere around maybe, let's say 50-ish hours, depending on how much you want to cheese the game systems. And at the time, this was another game that kind of came out that was largely mainframe, big computer lab based, terminal-based games. But by the late 80s, there was a port of this game called Moria, made by Jim Wilson, that ran on Unix, and that was the one that kind of spread out like a wildfire. So, I mean, that's also the version that you can still find today for the most part. So, again, a little anachronistic in our history telling here, but that's a pretty close version to what you can experience, as it were, at the time. There's a lot of differences between this and Rogue, although this plays very similar. You got your standard grid bumping, attacking, procedural level generation, food clocks, magic, etc., etc. But there's some big notable features about Moria that really kind of stand out and help to shape the direction of where things were going with other games. Kind of up at the top, one of the most notable ones is this system called Monster Memory. And if you want to call it a meta progression system, smirk, you could, because the more monsters that you fight in Moria, the game will gradually memorize their capabilities. And as you use your look command to examine some big red armored metal centipede or something, you'll learn more about, oh yes, I remember encountering 10 previous battles with this metal centipede and it having this much health and maybe doing this much damage, and that stuff filling out over time the more that you fight and defeat them. Even if, I believe, your character dies, restarting a new character, you'll still have this kind of progression system for how you remember fighting all these unique enemies. So the first time you encounter them, have no idea what this capital letter M is or what it's capable of. But the more that you fight it, the more and more that you'll learn about it. So you can come back in future games to be better prepared. Another stark difference is that you get XP for killing, and leveling up grants you stat increases. And so, I mean, Moria also places a big emphasis on XP from killing monsters. And this is where I think it has kind of the biggest direct lineage between this game and its eventual successor, Angband, and Angband's eventual successor, Diablo, where you have an incentive, instead of just to run through the dungeon and collect loot before your hunger clock runs out. Here you are more incentivized to grind monsters. Also notably, because you don't really have a food clock in this game. You are just kind of going at your own pace of, being able to dive 50 levels of this dungeon to fight the Balrog at the very bottom. And you can take as much time as you want to grind monsters and fight enemies and collect loot from them and use your word of recall to travel back to town to sell off that gear and create this kind of loot treadmill progression system throughout the game. And so related to that is this main starting town, which is another big innovation in Moria. You have probably the first instance of this in any game, where you have little if you use your imagination, little huts or buildings that kind of dot the town, and you have one little entrance to the dungeon there. But you have this little town with vendors there that are selling stuff. You have your magic shop, you got your armor shop, you got your alchemy shop, all that good stuff. And you have drunks wandering around through town, or intimidating looking fighter type people. And it kind of feels like this very living, breathing little town, very reminiscent of Diablo's town. Another major innovation here that Moria has brought to the table is the concept of a main starting town with vendors, which we'll see repurposed again in Angband and a little game that you may have heard of called Diablo. This is probably the first instance of this also in any game, as far as I know, especially for roguelikes. We see this in Caves of Cud, we see it in Hades, we see it now just in kind of a lot of different games. But this main starting town has kind of a unique atmosphere to it, where you have every so often roving hobos and thieves that can pickpocket you in town. You have very intimidating looking adventurers, and you have your main stores that you can interact with to kind of help set your run up or return to after farming through the dungeon, and get that loot treadmill going. So you have your general store, you have the armory, you have your weaponsmith, you have a temple, an alchemy shop, and a magic shop, where you can kind of, determine how your build progresses. Oh, maybe I want to, go and spec more into all these different magic spells and stuff. But again, this is something that feels very Diablo for 1983, almost more than a decade ahead of it. That you go through this procedural dungeon, you fight monsters, you pick up golden loot, and then you use your word of recall to go back to town, sell off all of that garbage you don't want, and then try to figure out how to progress your build from there. You also have a much more in-depth RPG-style character creation in Moria versus the original Rogue, which was you were just an adventurer plopped into the Dungeons of Doom, but this time kind of borrowing more from the Tolkien aesthetic, you are have a whole bunch of more options to deal with. So you can pick from being a human or a half-elf or a halfling or a gnome or a dwarf or a half-orc or half-troll. You can pick your gender between male or female. And then you can roll for your character background, which assigns you an early history, gives you starting money and a social class based on that history. It's more just kind of like flavor text, but also can determine how much gold you start with. That can kind of start your build out good or bad, depending on how. And so it could be something like, you are one of several children of a serf. You are a credit to the family. You have hazel eyes, curly blonde hair, and an average complexion, or something like that. You also have a bunch of different classes that you can pick right out the gate, between warrior, mage, priest, rogue, ranger, or paladin. The Tolkien theme here, I think, is actually kind of light, to be honest, but it does give you a little bit more of a characteristic thrust to the game than OG Rogue does, where that feels maybe a little more D&D inspired. In this case, you are dealing with a few more magic or items that are kind of Tolkienified, and as well as the big bad being the Balrog at floor 50 of the dungeon, helps to kind of thrust it into that more Tolkien narrative, so to speak. But for the most part, it still is kind of D&D-ish. I don't really remember Aragorn using magic missile a whole lot in The Lord of the Rings, but but this is also the first open source roguelike specifically. So the Seaport, which I guess is called Moria now by Jim Wilson, was the one that ran on Unix, and that was the one that really spread out. And that one really kind of sets it apart from the OG Rogue, which was very much kept closed source. But I think the idea of Rogue being closed source at the time really helped to kind of spur other people to say, well, I don't have the source code available, but I guess like all these systems are easy enough to kind of internalize and have me build out my own systems that are like Rogue, but what if I did this with it? Another feature between Moria and which almost kind of starts this continental divide of roguelikes between Moria and Angband, or what are called band games. You'll sometimes see something that's like an asterisk band. We'll maybe come to this more in a dedicated Angband episode, but between band likes and hack likes. More on hack in a minute here, but one major principle of Moria is that levels themselves are not preserved when you go up and down. So notably, you can go back to previous levels, I guess previous in air quotes. You can go up to higher depth, as it were, in Moria. But every time you go up and down stairs in this game, the level that you were just on is re-randomized. This was, I think, a computational limitation, or not a limitation, but it was it's that kind of Iron Man meme. I was limited by the technology of my time, sort of thing, where you didn't have to worry about preserving monster locations or items that you had dropped on previous floors, because all that stuff would be overwritten when you went to a new floor anyway. Now this causes a lot of big gameplay differences between Angband and NetHack, but here we're talking about Angband's predecessor Moria, and in a minute we'll be talking about NetHack's predecessor Hack. But this kind of, you go to any different staircase, you go up or down it, and everything is totally different from what it was a second ago, is a big deal with Moria and Angband type games, and that's something that we see here in spades. There's also other defining principles between band likes and hack likes. There's a lot of items in Moria and Angband-like games, ranging from things like broken sticks to super amazing swords. Your upgrade paths are really long as opposed to being super short, and your player character by the end is this kind of like godlike, super powerful character by the end of the game. I think we have this kind of rosy glasses expectation that, Rogue had this huge impact. But really, I think it was Moria and Hack, again, we'll come to in a minute, a lot to say, that kind of drove this initial push of open source, early hacker-like forks of games and having the source code available and spreading through Usenet was really something that set these games apart and just blew up in popularity versus something that, you either had to have BSD Unix running or access to a PDP-11 or all those kinds of things. And so, yeah, it's no surprise that people have fond memories of Moria and Angband and all of that stuff down the line from that. And Angband itself, the family tree from that has had a long and storied history itself. So Angband we get in 1990, which is 7 years after this. That follows with Tales of Maj'Eyal, I guess Tales of Middle-earth, kind of directly proceeding from that Tolkien theme. But from that, we also get Diablo 1. And more recently, we get more kind of true to form and paring down the game to be as Tolkien approved as possible with games like SIL, SIL, or SIL-Q. But Angband variants themselves, there's a whole lot of them. There are, let me check my data here, there's probably like over 70 as far as I know, that you can find on angband.live, which is a site that you can go to play all these different variants that are being constantly maintained. So there's a lot to say about Moria. We could definitely do a full episode on this in the future, but in the interest of time and keeping things moving along, let's get to some community correspondence here. I have a few letters written in to us that we'll kick off with. And starting with Mancube, who writes us in on Mastodon, grogpod@gamedev.place, to say of Moria, IMO, the best game in the roguelike genre. All sorts of enjoyable stuff came afterwards, but nothing better, flexing muscle emoji. I also reached out to friend of the show, Dan Reese, who I have previously done an episode about Dwarf Fortress with, which I'll link to in the show notes, on a different podcast that astute listeners will recognize. Woody, a frequent guest on this show. I was a infrequent guest on his video game podcast about N64 games at the time, and they had a Patreon going that let us talk about any game, so I picked Dwarf Fortress, and Dan joined me on that episode, and we geeked out a whole bunch. So I reached out to him about his experience with these older roguelike games, and so Dan writes us in to say, I didn't play much of the old Star Trek game. We came into possession of 3 or 4 ancient CP/M desktops that used floppies the size of LP vinyl records. The machines had printers built into the case of the computer and a monochrome monitor. I don't know how we came by these computers. My brother was a computer guy, so it may have been some connection of his, or possibly my dad telling some friends of a friend that, quote, sure, we'll take those extremely obsolete computers. My boys will love that. I don't think we had much software for these computers, so we didn't use them much. I think there was some sort of spreadsheet software I didn't know how to use or care about. What we did have was Star Trek. This was a command prompt game where you sent the USS Enterprise around the galaxy, blowing up Klingons and Romulans. I don't think there was any story at all. There was a grid display that would show your location, and you had to track your energy, shields, torpedoes, etc. We didn't have any rule books and never got really far into the game. I always got the impression that it was an independent project, and it didn't seem like Gene Roddenberry's style, seeing as the whole game was about shooting aliens. Never played Rogue or Moria, but I have played a lot of Angband. My brother somehow procured a floppy disk with Angband playable on our old Mac LC sometime in the early 90s. I was a lonely nerd who didn't have anybody to play Dungeons and Dragons with me, so it was just what I needed to scratch that itch. I copied save files so I could cheat death, but never beat the game until just a couple years ago. The game libraries are all in plain text, so I had fun modding weapons to be overpowered and read up on some monster secrets because I'm a cheater like that. I don't know how it is in Moria, but in Angband, many of the monsters and almost all of the unique enemies are based on J.R.R. Tolkien's writings. I break out my brother's copy of the Encyclopedia of Middle-earth so I could get the full lore on all the villains. I had read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, but I had no idea who Castamir the Usurper was, for example. Of course, in the game, Castamir is just a purple letter P, but it helped with the immersion. The display is in ASCII, with the player being the @ symbol, which feels just right. It's a pretty classic dungeon crawler where everyone you meet is an enemy. There are no puzzles, or NPCs, or riddles, just killing and dying. It's all I needed from a computer game at 14 years old. There is apparently an active development team, and they've been updating the game over the years, adding new classes and tinkering around the edges of the game mechanics. I've been playing the most recent version and spent some time on forums reading up on strategies. I haven't tried any of the new character classes because I'm really scratching the same itch I had when I was a kid. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. Our next letter we have in actually is a voice letter sent in by Marco, who also goes by Toma, and has an absolute gold mine of 100+ traditional roguelike reviews up on the resetera.com forums, linked to in the show notes. And Marco/Toma here sent us in almost like a 15-minute long voicemail, which great stuff. I'll link the full unedited version one here in the show notes as well. But here's some highlights for it related to Moria, traditional roguelikes, and more.
Hi, thanks for inviting me. I am the guy behind writing the 100 roguelike impressions thread that you contacted me about, and also working on my own roguelike called Roguelikes. And yeah, you have some really interesting questions, so let's just get right into it. My personal start into the genre of traditional roguelikes was probably around 20 to 25 years ago with Ancient Domains of Mystery, or also called Addon. Later on, it was the likes of Dwarf Fortress, Tales of Magial, probably like a million different Angband variants. I remember one very vividly with like Dragon Ball characters, and especially the Chiron series. There's something really powerful about exploring an imaginative world, even on like a very bad computer. Like these games really nailed that sense of exploration and discovery and just size that especially a young mind would probably be really impressed by. I mean, what is more exciting than venturing into a new world and be able to explore it again and again, not knowing what you will discover? I suppose it did help that I also had a bit of an emotional investment into actually getting these games to work, as I didn't have an internet connection back then and I needed to use my own single floppy disk that I had to transfer games over from the school computer back to my home PC, and sometimes in multiple trips just to get a single game to work. I was incredibly surprised after playing all of these games last year by how much these early games like Rogue or Moria were already bringing to the table. Like, I played these games for a long time, like the genre of roguelikes, but I never really looked into the roots and like the core games that founded this genre. And I kind of figured that over time, the community would have expanded on it, would have made them grander, bigger, add more features. But many features that we come to expect are actually based on what the oldest games in the genre already did. Like, of course, they're also based on Dungeons and Dragons tropes of characters and their abilities. But it is still crazy that Moria, like a game from 1989, I believe, already has like 50 enemy types, a persistent town with shopkeepers, different races, abilities, a bestiary that unlocks more information and more hints about the enemies. The more you play the game, the more you kill of that type. And honestly, these older games genuinely feel like they have more content than most traditional roguelikes that are releasing today, which is a testament to how well these old games are still holding up. Like, I was really, really impressed by that. And I absolutely think, like, if you're interested in roguelikes and if you're interested in modern traditional roguelikes, like the turn-based variant, that it's absolutely still worth going back to the quote-unquote old games. Because I don't think that the quality or that the worth of playing them has fallen off as hard as other genres might have. Yeah, Moria in particular is probably also kind of my white whale in that regard. Like, I would really love to just take some time to try to dig into trying to make some progress, trying to beat it. But beating that game, especially without any strategy guides, is basically almost impossible, which of course also adds to the allure, even if that type of challenge and difficulty is admittedly also a design concept I don't particularly need in most roguelikes. But for that game and where it comes from, and also, you know, where games were also intentionally very hard so that you could replay them and you didn't need to spend money on buying many other games, it does feel very special to have that as like a, you know, mountaintop challenge. So yeah, huge respect and shout out to everyone who after years of practice is still working on that and, you know, making their own characters survive in that game. Absolutely impressive. And I do want to give it a proper try myself sometime, even if that might take a few months. Well, when most people think of traditional roguelikes, I think they have a pretty stale and boring image of more or less the same type of game in their head. Like, you know, just you look at the screen, you just see a few letters, you walk into the letter and the letter disappears, especially if you take like the ASCII variants with just, you know, without any graphics. But there is quite a lot that they offer that no other game genre really does. Like, when I was playtesting Rogue Elements, which is the roguelike that I'm currently working on, I intentionally gave it to players that like to test that didn't have much or any at all any roguelike experience at all. And it was fascinating to see how many players who never experienced these type of games absolutely ended up loving the moment-to-moment decisions and puzzle nature a game like this can provide. Like, which other game genre does that? Like, it gives you a new puzzle and a new situation to solve without time pressure, with every single step you make and every new dungeon you enter. Like, every time you start the world, every time you restart, every time you take a step, every time you open a room, it's a new puzzle. And most games, it's not a puzzle. Like, if you play a role-playing game, a Final Fantasy, or if you play an action game, like, opening a door usually doesn't make every step of the game a puzzle. It's a completely different way to think about how to engage with a game. And it's super neat to see that the appeal of that still works if players get eased into the genre with tutorials, appealing graphics, maybe a bit more accommodating difficulty. So yeah, I really think that genre is still very, very special, and it's absolutely worth giving the shout out. I feel like many gamers are kind of missing out on an incredibly unique and deep game genre because of how small the visibility for these games is, in particular in the wider gaming space. Despite, in my opinion, the genre having the most unique and original games basically every year for decades. So yeah, the review marathon I did last year was easily one of the most satisfying and enriching gaming experiences I had. Maybe less so for the few games that basically barely functioned. But that's why I hope that the impressions that I wrote can serve as a good starting point for the community or for people just interested in the genre. So thanks for having a podcast on the topic. Thanks for reaching out. I do hope more people get inspired and involved in making these games, making more unique ideas. Thanks for having me.
We come to it at last, the great preview of our time. We come to 1984's Hack, not NetHack, Hack, the game that is the precursor to maybe the most famous ASCII game still around, maybe even more so than Rogue. 1984's Hack was created by high school students Jay Fenlinson, Kenny Woodland, Mike Thorne, and Jonathan Payne from the Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School as part of a computer class after seeing and playing Rogue at UC Berkeley, where they had incidentally tried to get the source code of the OG 1980 Rogue from Glenn Wickman and Michael Toy, but they had turned them down because I think the original Rogue devs wanted to commercialize the game and would do so later with a partnership with Epix. So they didn't really want to kind of give out their source material just yet. I mean, this was still back in the era when open source development was kind of a new thing. So as a result, the high school students kind of hacked together their own version of Rogue from what they remember playing at UC Berkeley. So that's kind of where the game gets its name from, Hack, because of hacking together from what they remember, as well as the hack and slash gameplay as well, which is one of the main Berlin criteria. And so after all their classes ended, the computer program had also ended. So they had a working game at that point. So Fenlinson had provided the source code to a local Usenix conference, which was eventually uploaded to Usenet news groups. Ask your grandparents, but this is kind of a proto-internet forum that you would use your gigantic computer to connect to over a phone modem. But yeah, kind of pre-internet as it were. I mean, you can still kind of see archives of these on Google groups. And kind of delve through the history on modern systems, which is kind of fascinating to see. But anyway, Eventually, Mike Stephenson took on the role as the lead maintainer of the hack source code, and then he decided to bring in Itzhak Miller, a philosophy professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and Janet Waltz, another computer hacker. And then they dubbed themselves the Dev Team, and wound up renaming their port of the code to NetHack, since their collaboration was done over the internet. They had expanded the whole bestiary of monsters, drew from sources outside of high fantasies like Discworld, which you can see with one of the character classes. And despite this game being open source, where people could freely download and make a fork of whatever, the maintainers of this, the dev team, made it so that only a few select members of the dev team could actually make modifications to their version of NetHack. So there's other forks of this like Slash'em and Hard Fought, but NetHack itself has kind of maintained this genealogy, this uninterrupted genealogy of the dev team for 40 years. Next year is going to be the 40th anniversary, which I think is going to be a stay tuned and a half for here on the GROGPOD. I'm almost certain that we are going to cover the real full-fledged, get its own dedicated episode for NetHack next year. So keep an ear out for that one. But your goal in 1984's Hack is very simple. It's very much like Rogue. It's a roguelike, if you will, where you descend 26 floors, you retrieve the Amulet of Yendor, getting a high score of collecting gold along the way. I think the time to beat this ranges anywhere from like 5 to 5,000 hours, I guess, depending on what version you're looking at. But I think my best guess is probably somewhere around 10-ish hours to beat the 1984 version of Hack. And some notable features that distinguish this from other versions that we've seen are we got starting pets. So you boot this up, and immediately you are being followed by a little meowing kitty cat or a barking puppy who will follow you throughout the dungeon in the first few levels, if you're good enough to keep them alive. You have a more explicit hunger clock here, which you can subside by, in a very heavy metal fashion, eating the corpses of your slain enemies in order to keep your hunger clock at bay, which may or may not have some debilitating, deleterious effects. So, for example, if you kill a zombie or some sort of rotting monster and you eat its corpse, you might be sick as a result from that. You got some different character classes of stark departure from what we saw in Moria. Your character classes here range between a caveman, a fighter, a knight, a speleologist, or someone who is, I believe it's a cave scientist, which might be a reference to Colossal Cave Adventure, who knows. You have a tourist, speaking of Discworld, and you have a wizard class. And each one of these kind of starts with different starting equipment. The wizard starts with a whole bunch of wands and stats. So you got your standard kind of D&D stats. You got your int, strength, charisma, etc., etc. And for example, like a wizard might be more tilted towards the intelligence end of the spectrum for casting spells and such. Kind of expanding a little bit on our discussion from Moria, hack-like games have about 5 primary characteristics that separate them from Moria-likes or Angband-likes or band games. Number one is the persistent level. So when you go from one level to another, that previous level is saved in memory, which we kind of take for granted nowadays, but back then was a big deal because you had so few limited computing cycles that had to be stored in memory. And more importantly, if you were to leave and drop weapons or enemy corpses and things on a previous level, you could go back to them and pick them up. So you could leave stuff behind and go back and pick it back up again. All that had to be stored in computer memory, which in the year of our Lord 2026 is also becoming a hot commodity. So maybe we'll be coming back to this day sooner rather than later. Anyway, number 2, complex interaction of properties. So for example, this is something where like almost everything has some sort of interaction with everything else in a very distinct manner. And it's kind of hard to list all these out. Maybe see our upcoming NetHack episode for more detail. But an example of this would be doing something like equipping a silver ring in a weapon slot and then doing damage against creatures that are only vulnerable to silver but not any other weapons. So there's a lot of that kind of emergent gameplay and system interactivity that you tend to find in games like Hack. Your inventory size is, I guess, bigger because you have the levels that you can act as kind of more storage by just dropping stuff and coming back to it. But you can also carry around many more different types of items than in like a Moria-like game. The levels are also much smaller. If in Moria, you're running around this enormous labyrinth that's very maze-like, but in Hack, it's a little bit more roguey in that you tend to just have like big open squares, small connected hallways between them, and it's oriented to fit more in the 80 by 20 square or tile size that a typical terminal would be. Other games like your Caves of Cuds or ADOMs or Moria even tend to be like the level generation is a little outside that window, so it's a little more scoped in here. Another difference here is you have a shorter equipment upgrade path. It's possible that the equipment that you start with right at the beginning of the game could be stuff like your end game equipment almost, depending on how good you can maintain and upgrade those charges to your staves and such. Identifying equipment is much more important than upgrading it here. You also tend to identify items by using them. So as opposed to just dumping a scroll of identify on everything, you might have to actually use a magic ring a few number of times or try to sell it and see what its sell value goes for to do different kinds of forms of identification. There's maybe one or more several little mini games that you can kind of metagame around within Hack and NetHack to identify what items are without actually using identify scrolls on them. And it has a shallower power curve as well. So, while at Moria, by the end of that, you're some all-fearing god killer. Here, instead of by a factor of increasing your power by a factor of 200, it's maybe like by a factor of 10 to 20 or something. There's no surface level town in Hack. You are just dumped right into the dungeon, and if you come across shops, it's similar to our previous episodes on like Sheeran the Wanderer or Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, where you just have these tiny little shops in the dungeon with a vendor there that walk over a whole room full of regex characters trying to figure out which bow that you want. And then paying your gold to leave or interacting with the shopkeep in all sorts of fun manners if you don't. So needless to say, there's a lot to cover with Hack. It has a huge legacy. There's so much in it that's going on, and we might cover this next year in a fully dedicated super episode with some special guests. But let's jump to some community correspondence. We have a lot of it, so let's get right to it. Code and Clarity writes to us on our Mastodon, grogpod@gamedev.place, to say, Hack's influence on procedural generation and early open source game development is immense. It's fascinating how much depth those original high school developers packed into it, laying the groundwork for NetHack and an entire genre, a true masterpiece of design longevity. Spiffy Voxel writes us to say, I played Hack in the computer labs at university in the late 80s/early 90s. In hindsight, probably too much rather than focusing on coursework. No Novel 9058 says, same, exact same. Started college 1984, discovered the basement terminal room connecting to VAX systems running BSD Unix, spent way too much time down there learning about Rogue, Larn, Hack, Moria, Hunt. We pretty much only paused for food, sleep, and occasionally to have some sessions of Cosmic Encounter, great board game. One of my more fond memories was discovering a bug in one of the games, probably Larn, where if you started the game and hit *C during the early startup process, literally crashed the VAX. It was a hilarious shouting of, hey, I've got something that crashes the system, hearing back, no way, saying, want me to demonstrate? Hearing, yeah, right, go for it. then proving my case. Pre-internet baggage says, I believe I first played hack in 1984 on a VAX 11750 running BSD Unix at my university. We played Mad Dash. Find a scroll, read it. Find a potion, quaff it. I remember the first halfway decent game I had, where I made it down to a level into the teens, an Umber Hulk showed up and killed me with 2 hits. I had never seen nor heard of an Umber Hulk before, and it completely cracked me up. I mean, WTF is an Umber Hulk? M. Bergman42 says, I played Rogue on a Sun mini computer in the early 80s, then we got hack. I remember my coworkers dropping everything at 5 p.m. and launching the game, thereby taking down system performance visibly. One time, it was right after 5 p.m., and my coworker, like me, a guy right out of college, first job, first year, stood up in his cubicle, looked around, and shouted, Hey everybody, I just got a scroll that made my hands red. Does anybody know what it does? It's a scroll of confused monster. That's how we found out that the division director, our boss's boss, was playing too. Some advice needed says, I played 2 as a kid, even before knowing my alphabet. I have a strong memory of my father pausing before hitting aggressively the right arrow to attack a scary monster, as if the extra effort gave him a higher chance of killing it. Been there. G. Calfred7 writes us to say, been playing hack since 1983, haven't won the damn game yet, lol. Dr. Barfenstein, great name, writes us to say, my uncle bought a 286 PC that came with games. We had a PC XT, ancient, no instructions. At the age of 8, my literacy was barely good enough, and we, me and my little bro, weren't even sure that hack was a game. We didn't know much about PCs at this stage, so we couldn't access the help file. We pushed every key on the keyboard and tried to interpret what each button did by the dialogue. Had to consult a dictionary for words like quaff and wield. It was ages before we learned that question mark opened the help file. No internet, so no access to spoilers. We slowly built our own, writing down what we could eat, etc. We got good enough to get down into the maze levels. I think that was the first times that we got there just by digging down over and over and then freaking out when the floor became undiggable. Never finished it. About a decade later, I met a guy in high school. He showed me a game called NetHack, and I recognized it instantly. Pass2 says, I got a DOS PC in 1988. I played some version of NetHack 2 first, and after liking that, checked out Hack. I think version 1.21 because I remember it had colors, and that I wasn't used to in NetHack. Never played much of it as NetHack seemed superior. Anti5 says, I played Hack very briefly around 1990. Elementary school friend had it on his father's PC, and he said it's kind of cool because it's, quote, like D&D, meaning the tabletop RPG that we played. So Hack was my first introduction to Roguelikes. I quickly switched to NetHack 3.0, and when it was released in 1993 to NetHack 3.1. Concept Junkie says, I played Hack in college around 1986 and loved it. I used to know which machines in the computer lab had 320 kilobytes of RAM. I didn't know if it made any difference, but I always went for those. I forget the exact version, but I probably have it on my archives. I continued following it and NetHack to this day, but I haven't played much in recent years because it's become so hard. Quote, my, what a yummy mango. Drifts writes us to say, back in the late 80s, child me had a Mac. Occasionally, someone would hand me a floppy with mysterious goodies on it. One of those times, it had NetHack for Mac. I quickly learned the controls and began exploring. I soon began having nightmares of randomly seeing the letter C in a hallway. Pudgy Ninja says, I got a copy of Hack on a shareware disc in about 1987. I loved it. I was familiar with Rogue, but this had so much more going on. There were plaintext files for fortune cookies and maybe the Oracle question mark? Not sure on that part, but I poured through that for hints. The day I figured out how to level teleport into hell was huge. I just loved discovering interactions. This went on to shape the way that I played NetHack when I first encountered it years later. I'm not going to say I was 100% spoiler-free, but I did my best to avoid them. And my first ascension took me about 20 years. After that, I dove into the wiki, and that's been fun too. Course You Do says, Original Hack is one of the first games I remember playing on my dad's Unix machine. I was a small child and terrible at it, of course, but I've come back to it later on, and while I don't play as much anymore, I still come back to some variant or another from time to time. Listener says, my friend and I played Hack on my compact luggable in 87 to 88 in college. We played a lot of it studying. We also kept a log of artifacts for each player, so when we found the ghost, we'd have some idea of what was there. I haven't thought about that for quite a while, but now that I'm racking my brain, I think it's one of the ghosts was eats dirt. I expect I still have the notebook in storage. Thor War says, I played it on an Amiga in the mid-80s. There was a big article about it in Amiga magazine, and I was fascinated. No idea how my dad got his hands on a copy in the pre-internet days. Maybe the magazine had a dial-in BBS? But it somehow appeared on a floppy in our house, and I played the hell out of it. Wizard of Yendor 1, great name, says, late 80s, early 90s for me. Spent untold thousands of hours playing it. Even printed off a guide on a dot matrix printer for reference. Still play it to this day, only legit ascended twice. Jasso Kissa says, I got a copy of Hack from a friend probably around 1985 to 1986. Took a long time to figure out why my dungeon always collapsed. After finding out I needed to edit the options file to save to drive B, it was smooth sailings. With our Olivetti MT21, ... I can't even imagine how many thousands of hours I've spent playing on different versions. What kept me coming back? ? It was always a new adventure, and I'm guessing the ASCII quote graphics left much of it to your own imagination. Finally, Bouquet says, my uncle worked at Sun Microsystems back in the day. He gave me a dial-in account, and I'd connect and play Hack, Hunt the Wumpus, and Zork. After a few local computer group meetups, I discovered Moria for this Commodore 64, then picked up NetHack on the Unix server in college. Took a 20-year hiatus, only really got back into online play about 15 years ago. Next game on our list here is 1986's Larn, developed by Noah Morgan, who was a developer at the Digital Equipment Corporation, who are the creators of the PDP mainframes that we've seen. Basically, all of these games either been developed on or exist on for the most part. So really the kind of beating heart of the original roguelike scene. And in Larn, takes a stark departure from a lot of the other games that we've covered thus far, in that it is much faster. So your goal here is that the player character's daughter is sick and needs to be cured within a certain time frame. Good standard trope. And the how long to beat for this is much shorter. This is a roguelike that you could probably beat in anywhere between 30 minutes to like a couple hours, depending on how pro at ASCII interpretation you are. The most notable feature here with Larn is its, I guess, maybe hunger clock / time limit. I guess it's not really a hunger clock per se, because you're not going hungry, but you have your daughter's going hungry for that poison cure, and you only have 300 mobiles, in air quotes, or time units. So you have that clock to tick down to beat this game before all hope is lost. This game comes with 100 difficulty levels to it as well, which you can almost kind of think of as like almost kind of like early ascension levels in a way. You have sort of an overworld to this game. I would say maybe like a cross between like a home village, like you would from Moria, and maybe like an overworld. But notably, you also have taxes in Larn, meaning that after you win the game, your player will owe 5% of your score in taxes. And you're not able to interact with the D&D store or the bank in subsequent games until you've paid those taxes. And then payments toward the player's taxes accumulate across multiple games as well, almost kind of like a taxation meta progression system. The main dungeon to this game is up only 10 levels, but it is very tight, it is very focused and very quick. It's almost kind of like you're getting a speedrun experience of a traditional roguelike. But you also have a parallel dungeon called the Volcano, which can be thought of as maybe hard mode, and that is only 5 levels. So if you even wanted a more turbo experience than the turbo, you got a molten option down there. You boot up a game of Larn, and you are greeted with this fun kind of flavored text that says, "Welcome to the game of Larn. At this moment, you face a great problem. Your daughter has contracted a strange disease, and none of your home remedies seem to have any effect. You sense that she is in mortal danger, and you must try to save her. Time ago, you heard of a land of great danger and opportunity. Perhaps here is the solution you need. It has been said that there once was a great magician who called himself Polyneus. Many years ago, after many miraculous successes, Polyneus retired to the caverns of Larn, where he devoted most of his time to the creation of magic. Rumors have it that one day Polyneus set out to dispel an attacking army in a forest some distance to the north. It is believed that he there met his demise. The caverns of Larn, it is thought, must be magnificent in design and contain much magic and treasure. One option you have is to undertake a journey into these caverns. Good luck, you're going to need it." I think this flavor text is great. It really gets you seated into the moment instead of just being like, all right, yep, you're in a dungeon, go for it. I guess to some extent, maybe the commercial version of Epic's Rogue had like a manual that had a little more flavor text to it. But this feels very fun to me, even though that like a lot of the stuff doesn't really impact any part of the game at all. Like you're not going to some forest in the north to hunt down Polyneus or anything. But it's good. It's some good world setting, I think. So in the overworld, you have your kind of main town that has like a college. These are all represented with just like single letters, by the way. So you're kind of running around a big open space. And at first you might be thinking like, oh, is there something wrong with my monitor? I'm only seeing like 5 characters on the screen. That is your overworld. Those characters are the I guess buildings that you go to, but you have a college, a bank that pays interest, you got the tax collector, you have a D&D store, of course, like all roguelikes need, and you have a healer. So there's some meta systems going on here. You can go down and grind some XP, and then you return to town and buy a spell with knowledge and study time. But it's worth noting that this time clicks down the mobile clock, and if you're sitting down, sitting in town, and you're spending money, your daughter's death clock is still ticking. So you have to be very decisive and judicious about what you're spending your time on between dungeon delving and coming back to town, and how much is that going to help you level up to go even further deep down into the town. And so Larn kind of sets the stage for, I think, the subgenre of coffee break roguelikes, or games that you could really just kind of sit down and play in one sitting. Maybe, well, let's say like you're taking your time with that coffee for 30 minutes or a couple hours. But for things like Doom RL or stay tuned, Brogue for part 3, or Hoplite, or some of these other games, like these are like pretty quick experiences, and I think they kind of owe a lot back to Larn, which is a stark departure from things like Moria, which can take dozens or possibly hundreds of hours to beat, or Hack, which, you know, as we listened in on some of those letters, some people take years or decades to beat. So Larn is a good way to kind of dial that back down a little bit, to say, hey, you know, maybe these games can actually, or maybe should be beatable in an hour or two or something like that. We got an email to the podcast, for which you too can send in at grogpodzone@gmail.com, from Jay, who is the maintainer of the larn.org website, who says, "Hi Scott, the short version of what I'd like people to know about Larn is that it is like roguelike espresso. It's everything I like about the genre in a delicious, concentrated dose, smiley face. For a longer answer, here's the answer I gave to a Finnish magazine a couple years back. I think I was about 10 years old, 1986, when I first played Larn. My brother was older and in university at the time, and he brought the PC version home one day. Me and my best friend Rob were obsessed with it. We continued to play for decades after. Rob is still my main beta tester and is undoubtedly one of the best players of the game. If you look at the scoreboard, Rob, the Warrior of Doom, is the top scorer in Larn and Larn by a very wide margin. I think my favorite part about the game is that it's relatively simple and yet infinitely replayable. You can dial in the difficulty to whatever you want and it stays well balanced. Nowadays, I usually just play at the easiest difficulty and treat it like a relaxing contemplative koi pond. There's never really any danger that I'm going to lose, but it's always fun to see how I'm going to put a win together. There's almost always something that you can do to get yourself out of a tricky situation. Cheers! I'll also read off this review that Toma, who sent in the very nice long voicemail for our Moria coverage, who says, Larn is another granddaddy in the genre, defying a lot of the usual roguelike conventions, with the first version appearing in 1986 and getting a graphical overhaul version on the Steam/phone in recent years. I love seeing how different the ideas were back then, considering how much of the roguelike structure we take for granted. The starting town has a bank to save up some money, an office to pay your income taxes, and a D&D store, the usual roguelike elements. None of this is terribly complex, but as with the rest of the game, it gives the game a very distinct personality and challenge. It's less of an endless, vast playground and more of an ever-changing and concise puzzle box. It only has 10 dungeon levels to conquer, but knowing how and when to approach certain enemies and how to use the dungeon elements to your advantage is a part of the challenge that you will need to figure out instead of the game providing you with everything you need in handy info boxes. In line with game design of the 80s, a lot of the game information is a bit obscured. Not in a way that would make you throw the game at the wall, but, quote, what does it mean if the game tells me I feel a loss of sense? Or, what are all these statues for? Or, what do I even need to pay taxes? You will need a healthy dose of curiosity here, but it's all relatively self-contained in just a few dungeon levels. You can also keep trying a few times to see what things do without ever feeling like you wasted a ton of time. It's very much intended to be a shorter roguelike experience that you can retry on higher difficulty after beating it. Speaking of which, the game has 99 difficulty levels that you gradually unlock, making this very concise puzzle challenge harder and harder, while allowing you to slowly get used to the tools at your disposal and learning new ways to use them, or exploring other spells/items/level elements that you might not have needed before. It's a cool system that has a lot of tactical considerations and surprises in store for you, even if the first impression makes it seem a bit dry. It's definitely an experience worth looking into and seeing what this puzzle box throws at you. Oh, also, shift plus movement speeds up exploration a ton, making it a lot more pleasant to play. Finally, our last game that we'll talk about here is the 1987 roguelike Omega, developed by one Lawrence Brothers at Rutgers University. And the goal here is kind of open-ended. It's not really very obvious at the start what you should be doing, which we'll get into in a minute, but is part of this game's maybe kind of guiding ethos of being an open world roguelike game, which was kind of unheard of for 1987. I mean, let alone open world games in general. But as you start, if you visit the Duke of Rampart, he'll tell you to bring him the head of the Goblin King. And if you do that, he'll ask for the Holy Defender, which can be found in possession of the worm, which is located 20 levels below the city's sewers. And these quests continue until you eventually travel to different astral planes and bring the Duke the Orb of Elemental Mastery, at which point he steps down and you become the Duke, which could be the ending of this game, maybe one of many, but there's also 7, at least, different religions that you can join, at least 6 different guilds between things like a wizard's college, sorcerer's guild, thieves guild, mercenaries, the arena, the paladins, and there's an alignment system being lawful good. I think as a paladin, you have to maintain lawful good by not proactively hitting monsters, otherwise you lose your lawful good status. There's also the Adept's Challenge, in which you can literally fight Death himself, which I believe every time that you kill him, I think he keeps popping back up stronger and stronger, and the only way to really win this encounter is to jump through the void, which I believe is some sort of equivalent to winning, but the game just deposits you back into the main overworld wilderness to kind of continue slogging on. So almost kind of something like, it reminds me of like Risk of Rain in some sense of like annihilating yourself with like a space-time pillar. Anyway, How Long to Beat has no idea how long this game is. I don't think most people know how long this game is, but if I had to gut check, I would say anywhere between like maybe 20 to 40 hours maybe, just because of how deceptively huge this game is. Like I said kind of earlier, notable features, this has a large overworld with multiple cities and dungeons, as opposed to just focusing on a single dungeon descent. There's elaborate guild systems, complex character advancement, multiple victory conditions, detailed world simulation, NPC interactions. I mean, you name it, it's got it. For a solo dev effort in 1987 for a traditional ASCII-based roguelike game, man, it's got quite a lot going on with it. One example, I mean, when you first boot up Omega, it kind of sets the stage for this kind of very, very fun, thoughtful flavor that it has going on for it. It'll boot up, it'll tell you who the Lord of Chaos, the Lord of Law is, who's the Duke of Rampart right now, even going down to like, who all the different like guild leaders, the high priests, the archdruid. I think these are all randomized every time, unless Humperdinck is the Lord of Destiny every time, which would be pretty great. But as we advance through, you can go through like a very in-depth, almost Pokemon Mystery Dungeon style character creation sequence that asks you a lot of personal details of like, how much can you bench press? What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Kind of thing. That I don't know how much bearing that has on really your character creation, but it's kind of fun to play this little almost kind of character creation Quizlet to start this game with. But you continue on, and eventually the game starts with, it's a blink and you miss it kind of a thing, because for something that's played in a terminal, it starts with something like, oh, you're just at your average day of work. The text says the project demo is due tomorrow, or that is today at 9 a.m. It's now 3 a.m. Printouts, pizza boxes, and Szechuan kitchen trays litter your desk, and the bitmap screen seems to warp in and out of focus. The compiler seems to be taking forever. You do a routine check on your file system. You, in almost kind of an inscription-like way, it has a list of stuff on there. It says, how odd, the /secure file system definitely shouldn't be mounted. It must be space used by the Omega team, a very hush-hush project you know nothing about. Well, no wonder. The compiler is wedged. You don't seem to have any disk space left. Unfortunately, there is no night operator, and you don't know the SU password, sudo, as it were. Cursing, you figure you can at least find out what the damn Omega group is doing. And the game like types in these Linux commands of like you navigating a Unix, or I guess in this case Unix file structure, of someone going in and reading the README for the Omega project. And it says, if you are reading this file, you should not be reading this file. Call your project cadre leader at once. To which the player character says, not bloody likely. You search for a doc. Not big on documentation, huh? You search for the source code. Wow, that must be Mondo Parallel C for the new optical machine. Then you find a runtime that just says Omega. Well, hell, what can happen? And if it does, it's not my fault the damn file system is mounted. You execute the Omega program. The computer, the readout says, "This was definitely a mistake. For long moments, nothing seemed to happen. There was a flare of bluish light from the workstation screen, like a brightness of 256 on a scale of 0 to 7. You wake up with a serious headache outside of the massive gates of a walled city. You notice a pouch at your side that seems to be filled with gold. You seem to hear a faint voice fading off into the distance. Interrupt zigzap at 0x0... ... And then you are greeted with a giant wall of ASCII that is the city of Rampart. Your little @ symbol is kind of standing in this long causeway surrounded by capital G's, or town guards. And there's a more hashtags than you can shake a former Twitter platform at that indicate the buildings in the city of Rampart. So you'll notice that you have like your HP, mana, your gold, what level you are, all of your other D&D kind of stats as well on the screen. But it can be a little visually overwhelming at first. Like, well, this is a lot more stuff to look at than what Larn was giving me to work with here. You can do stuff like you can talk to the town guards who say, "Move it along there, peasant, keep moving." And if you accidentally bump into them, yes, of course, they'll bludgeon you to death, like all good fantasy games. But as you are trundling around through the city of Rampart, there's all sorts of places to go in and visit. It's almost kind of like an imperial city from an Elder Scrolls game, where you'll have the city gates, you got your Pantheon, you have your Collegium Magi, your Mercenaries Guild, your Sorcerers Guild, the bank, statue garden, you got the hedge maze, there's a cemetery, you got the main castle, you got the city jail, GAOL, which is great, you got the Order of Paladins, and most importantly, you have the Arena and Gladiators Guild, which I think most people will go down to the bottom right corner for the Gladiators Guild and grind some gold there in order to go up to the Order of the Paladins, where you can start getting some decent gear to start with. But typically you'll go to Castle Rampart, you'll say, "Oh, I gotta go and fight the Goblin King," or go down to fight the Worm. But there's this big nasty hedge maze in the center of town that's filled with all sorts of traps and monsters and such that can throw you off your horse and kill you almost instantly as soon as you have started the game. I kind of want to read through some of this old Usenet thread from alt.games.omega, posted by the Mjolnir Research Project on March 24th, 1993. That kind of goes through like a guide on how to cheese Omega for an easy victory. But I won't read through the whole thing. It's a big thread. I'll maybe link it in the show notes here, but just to kind of talk through a little bit, jumping around here there to kind of give a little bit of sense of scale and just depth to what you have in store for Omega. They say, I got this spoiler from rec.games.misc a couple years ago. I don't know what version it refers to, but I've tried it and it works. Here's the formula to absolutely destroy the game of Omega. Major spoilers, as you would expect. The formula mainly revolves around becoming an adept as soon as possible. I think that's your rank overall in the game. And abusing the infinite wish privilege. If you are familiar with the game, you only need to look at the headings of the various steps. Further information is included, blah, 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 blah. Starts with step 1. Give 1 gold piece to the hospice. This makes you marginally lawful, so the paladins will accept you. Step 2, become a paladin. This gives you free horses, a new one whenever the first one dies or you let go, which from what I've seen happens a lot, a free meal and free curing whenever you get sick or whatever. It also gives you a lame weapon. Number 3, stock up on food. Number 4 is conspicuously missing. Number 5, buy some kind of armor. Don't waste money here. The armor eventually will go away. Buy soft leather. Step 6, go to Woodhenge. Talk to the Archdruid. Woodhenge is located 6 squares north and 3 squares west of the village of Woodmere, which is at the north fork of the road. Pass through the altar, but do not worship. At the northern end of the temple, search for a double hidden door on the west wall. The Archdruid is in the room at the end of the hall. You'll gain 3 experience levels for just talking to him, which will help you survive in the wilderness. Do not use the Sea of Chaos trick to gain experience. You need the ability later. Avoid any conflict in the wilderness. The creatures are usually way beyond you. Next step, go to the Law Stone, raise Constitution. It's located in the village of Starview, which is in the northeast corner of the map. It is marked with an 8. Keep worshipping the stone until your max con is raised by 10. The stone glows cosmic. Various things may happen to you before this happens. Here are the only ones to worry about. 1. You start to foam at the mouth. You become berserk. This is no problem unless you move next to another creature. Avoid this until you are healed. Do not move next to any guardsman or you'll die. It's best to wait this out before continuing to worship the stone. 2. A portal opens and a confused monster appears. A monster appears. This is the worst reaction. The simplest solution is to go back into the wilderness and re-enter the village. The game forgets village information after you leave, so the monster will disappear. 3. You developed an advanced case of leprosy. You become diseased and drop to 1 HP. You get cured at the tavern, drinking Tullymore Dew until it totally cures you of anything. Wait for all of your HP to return. You are struck by lightning, causing a lot of damage. This is why you need your HP to attempt the worshipping. I'll scroll through some of these here, and let's maybe jump to number 16 on the list here. Go to the Temple of Destiny. It's located 8 squares east and 16 squares south of the village of Scorch. But don't go through the desert or over the mountains. Go west around the southern mountain range, then south, then east to the jungle. You have to go through the jungle. The temple is surrounded by 8 squares of Chaos Sea. This is the landmark to look for. The temple is at the center. Cross the Sea of Chaos. You may do this once only and enter the temple. If you got to worship at the altar in the city, you will die. Step 17, enter the Abyss. It is the 0 character in the middle of the temple. You will have to dismount your horse. If you worshipped at any other altar except that of Destiny, the Abyss will not appear. 18, complete the Adept's Challenge. You need to have Intelligence, Constitution, Power, and Strength, all 30 or above. Enter the 4 elemental stations, fire, earth, air, and water. Do not back down. Death will appear. Defeat him with your bare hands. No big deal. He should come back to life and laugh at you or some such. There is a bug where he does not come back to life, but his corpse is labeled. I can't believe you are seeing this. Don't pick up the corpse in this case. Pick up the Scythe of Death and throw it into the Abyss, the blank space in the center. Then jump in. You should become an adept. Some quick community correspondence here. Ian Badco writes us on our Mastodon, GROGPOD@GameDev.place, to say, I remember Omega with great fondness, particularly the create your character via answering questions, opening scene, and such quips as, congratulations, you've achieved maximum entropy. Corden C wrote us to say, it is 1993. I am playing Omega. It is 2004. I am playing Omega. It is 2016. I am playing Omega. And it is 2026. Once again, I am playing Omega. Why? I played most of the old roguelikes while avoiding study in the 90s, but Omega is the only one I regularly return to. It's not the best of its genre. The inventory system is, if I'm being polite, unusual. The early game RNG, brutal. The late game, too soft. And I've hit more than a few bugs along my journey. However, it was Omega's scale that attracted me to the game. There is a sense that a whole world, or at least an island, exists around the dungeons that provide most of the usual action. There is a town to investigate which has more happening than just a place to restock. Outside the town is a countryside to explore with villages, wild animals, and of course the occasional dungeon too. Omega is an early attempt at an open world. These early roguelikes are a hive of experimentation. They are the indie games of their time. So many ideas were thrown together by people trying to recreate their tabletop RPG sessions. For me, Omega succeeded more in this than it failed. It feels like there is a world continuing along regardless of the player's actions. This isn't true, of course, but it's the impression that counts, and that is enough for me. All All right, well, welcome back. A full week after our last recording, wink, wink, as it's more of like maybe more of like an hour for us in the previous times. So once again, we are recording our sort of live first impressions. This time with the real Roguelikes, the capital R Roguelikes, the first generation, the first wave of games in the wake of Rogue. We have our 1983 roguelike Moria, which has given birth to our wave of Angband games and Diablo clones and such. We have our 1984 release of Hack, which has given us our 40th anniversary of NetHack coming up next year. We have our 1986 release of Larn and our 1987 release of Omega. So our last week we kind of talked about how the games that came before Rogue had influenced it and how Rogue has sort of how do we feel about Rogue in that context. In this context, I feel like it's more of how do we feel about ASCII games. We played all of these in ASCII. I guess maybe we'll talk a little bit more about Hack in a minute, but ASCII games, particularly from the early 80s, as like the first wave of things that I'm sure have had many polish passes since then. But there's two biggies and two smallies between the biggies of Moria and Hack, and then the two smaller ones of Larn and Omega. So I guess maybe I'll open it up to the floor again of how do we feel about this first wave of games within the wake of Rogue since back in this time period?
Well, I can tell you how some of the developers feel. If you go into the Omega, like, README information, one of the pages explains that, this game is similar to Rogue, but Rogue is a very simple game. It specifically describes it as a simple game. And then proceeds to talk about how great their game is and how, we don't need to worry about this Rogue. And interestingly, Omega doesn't even use the term roguelike. It uses the term rogue style, which I think would have been kind of a fun... What if that had taken off as the genre title? Rogue style games.
I almost feel like that might be coming back because people are so bent out of shape about what roguelike or light differences are. Rogue style feels like a much more diplomatic approach to that.
I think it may be. None of these games improved on the graphics issue. Welcome to the Dungeon is still reigning supreme in the graphics department.
For Petit 5, you mean?
For Petit 5, excuse me. Petit 5, Welcome to the Dungeon.
In some ways, they're worse, in fact. I would say that Moria is more visually complicated, and it was harder to stare at in a lot of ways. It's visually more complicated. There's a lot more stuff going on.
Yes.
But in a good and bad way. Rogue is simple enough that you can get away with just having ASCII graphics. These are starting to, there's a lot more stuff happening.
It's so much more dense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, totally. That's very true. That's very true. Would have been nice. And to that point, it makes me, it reminds me of how thankful we all should be for the graphical update that CUD got.
Yeah.
Because even though, and
Dwarf Fortress.
And Dwarf Fortress.
Yep.
Obviously, the fidelity, it's not super high res, but having those bespoke images for individual things is, it's such a incredible leap forward in terms of the readability and everything. That being said, I think overall, ASCII games they're perfectly playable. Not perfectly, but they are playable.
I understand there's definitely something good about ASCII in terms of you can get a lot of visual density in there too. I think that playing, right now I'm staring at the screen for Moria and Larn, and I think one of the biggest things that hurts Moria is lack of color. Color's really useful in terms of differentiating things.
So true.
Having it just be pure black and white is kind of rough.
I guess to be clear for listeners, the things that we're playing, because there's a lot of different versions for these things that exist out there. For Moria, we're playing Moria umoria.org, I'm pretty sure is what it is, which is all black and white. I don't think that there's a tile set option. Larn, we're playing from larn.org. Hack, we're playing from Donnie Russell II's website, which is a JavaScript web browser based version of Hack. And Omega, we're also playing from Donnie Russell's website, which is a JavaScript implementation of Omega. So some of these,
I have no idea what they looked like in their original implementation, but that's more just a comment of like, oh yeah, even Moria, and I'm sure that the later versions of Moria derivatives had color, and I bet you that helped in terms of like the readability of the game.
But like you were saying, like with information density, so like Moria is the first roguelike. Like this was the first thing from Rogue's wake, and because Rogue wasn't open source, people had to scrabble together like, I think Rogue kind of worked like this, so I'll type, make my own Rogue. And we can immediately see how stark of a departure Moria is.
Yeah, honestly, it feels like the game genre should probably be Moria-like and not roguelike. Like, more stuff feels like... This feels more like the rest of the genre than Rogue does to me.
Interesting.
Just in terms of, like, the twisty passage corridor exploration stuff, and, like, the inventory system, and...
Indeed.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's a town.
Yeah.
Is something that, I associate with roguelikedom and even traditional roguelikes.
Yeah. I think one thing that kind of sets Moria apart from the others, well, we'll get into Omega here in a minute, but maybe length and like how long the game is. So Rogue itself is not it's 25 floors. You could probably beat that in a few hours if you were really good at it. Moria, I think, might take...
Yeah, what were you telling us?
I think it maybe takes 50 hours to beat it with a single character. Oh. Because the end boss, so you're grinding through 50 floors in Moria to fight the Balrog of Khazad-dûm at the bottom, as you would expect from a Mines of Moria game. And I think in classic Diablo fashion, you're grinding monsters for XP and loot. And you have this loot cycle where you go back to town, you dump all your stuff, and you're building up your character that way. Versus something like Rogue, or maybe even like Hack, or some of these other games that your build is much more determined by the stuff you pick up, which I think helps to streamline it. So Moria already is kind of a very stark departure from that, with like way more... I almost think of Moria as like a permadeath RPG, and less of a roguelike specifically.
Well, and specifically looking at that as compared to something like Caves of Qud, where Caves of Qud is not kind of like a roguelike RPG. It's explicitly a RPG with roguelike elements.
Yeah.
So
totally. I mean, Moria, the Tolkien theme, as between our D&D and Tolkien experts here, how much of a Tolkien aspect do we get from Moria here?
Well, before we get to that question, it occurs to me that if I'm remembering correctly, which I might not be, Tolkien could have seen Moria potentially. Or
his lawyers may have.
Did he live till? Well,
86?
maybe not. No, my mistake. I thought we were still in like the early 80s.
It was probably.
You know what? Never mind. I'm a terrible nerd.
As someone who's read a lot about Tolkien, I'm guaranteeing that he didn't see it.
What would
he wasn't have that kind of guy.
I wonder.
He wouldn't have liked it.
That's
probably wouldn't have liked it.
Tolkien was a much more FPS meathead.
Yes, exactly. He's like, where's the first person perspective and the blood and guts and the ripping and tearing. So. A great impersonation, by the way, for the record. What do we think as longtime D&D heads? I don't know that much about Tolkien.
It seems more like D&D than Tolkien.
Oh, for sure.
Like it's got the 6 stats.
Right.
That's
charisma is written out as CHR instead of CHA, but
but yeah, like it's I don't really know how they're used. It didn't seem. I mean, we didn't play it for long enough. Yeah, I mean, Andrew got killed within like 4 seconds of being in the dungeon.
Yeah,
in his first character.
I spent a lot of time in town gearing up, and then first room.
Yeah, didn't even make it out of the
Two
first.
kobolds jumped me, and many such cases, you know.
That's what you get for haggling so bad with the shopkeep.
That's true. This game has a very involved haggling system, y'all, and a lot of like specific, like a big bunch of different, a large collection of lines and phrases that the shopkeepers will use, which is very entertaining in the haggling process. So yeah, it feels a lot like Dungeons and Dragons. Obviously, your goal is to go and kill the Balrog, which is and obviously the game is called Moria. So very Lord of the Rings. Is it more D&D than Lord of the Rings? I'm not sure. Something I do want to call out is that you can stake shut. You can use a spike to spike shut dungeon doors, which is something that you would do in a proper old school dungeon crawl experience in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I was delighted to see that as an option here. That is one of the most advanced Dungeons and Dragons things you can do: spike shut a door.
I looked it up. Tolkien died in 73, so he definitely did not.
Not
see
even
this.
close. Not even close.
Definitely
Okay.
did not.
What about
But-
Tolkien Jr.?
But maybe he played Star
Christopher
Trek.
Tolkien almost certainly is aware of the existence of this game.
Indeed. So he had to stick.
I'm not
to-
sure he's still alive though.
No,
Do you know-
he's long. I think.
Tolkien was born in 1892. He's from a different age.
Thanks to Betsy.
was a simpler
Which
time.
age exactly?
The first age?
The third age.
Boom. Okay. So obviously there's no party system, so in that way it doesn't feel super D&D. But that's Lord of the Rings. Obviously you associate with having a party as well. So I don't know if you had to say, I don't know, just for funsies, is it more D&D or is it more Lord of the Rings? Colin,
I would say it's more D&D.
there you have it.
also more
You
D&D.
played way more of it than me, so
Yeah. Well, it's just like it's more fantasy video game. Like you got the 6 stats. You got your shopkeep stuff.
Stats are a big
It,
thing.
it feels like this feels like a video game now. Like the other ones feel like they're on the path to video games. But they're like precursors.
They're getting there.
Yeah. Like they're missing a lot of elements. Like they haven't settled into the format. And even this one still has a couple of things like charisma being CHR instead of CHA. It's like, but that's a pretty small nitpick in terms of we're getting to like, oh, these random 6 stats that we've chosen are like the 6 that are now 40 years later we're still putting the same 6 in video games.
Quite.
And when it's a choice when you depart from them.
Yeah, it felt very D&D to me also because I was playing once again on my Steam Deck on a Game Boy Advanced or a Nintendo DS version that you can download of Moria that you can play on RetroArch, which is nice.
Give me that touchscreen.
And
give me that 3DS 3D capability.
and I was RPing as an Aragorn stand-in every time called Grogagorn. That I was like
Aragog.
Oh, that's a good one too. I was like, okay, I'll do Ranger class because I think Ranger has access to magic and like some decent starting stuff and gearing up in town, and then like running through and the concept of Aragorn running around through a dungeon casting magic missile feels a little off to me. Yeah. Especially because like none of the early enemies feel very Tolkien to me. They feel like giant like metal centipedes or like worm masses.
Yeah.
I haven't read the Silmarillion, so I don't know if those are in there, but I didn't get the sense from the movies or the books. So I think it's fine for like a D&D fantasy game with a light Tolkien theme of like your objective is to go and defeat the Balrog as opposed to like getting the Amulet of Yendor, which is similarly I don't know, like it's not super deep, but it's fine. But yeah, I think Moria feels a lot bigger, a lot grindier than Rogue. Maybe not necessarily to its advantage, but I could see how at the time, if this was like the only game that you had access to in 1983. Yeah.
I will say that I don't know if I had as much fun in the like 25 minutes that I played of it. Just because it's like, oh, it's way more complicated. There's just so many more things, systems. Exploration is a lot more intense. You're like, all right, I actually have to start like figuring out how this map works and like, okay,
Even just the menuing.
Yeah.
Felt very draining, honestly.
But I I can imagine why someone would spend 50 hours to beat this game versus if you're playing 50 hours of the original Roguelike, that's a lot of time in that game. If you have any other option. So like, and given the technology of the time, like if you're playing this or I guess like Mario or
Yeah, I mean during
Pong or what are the other, like the other options are pretty like low level in terms of like deep complexity. And this is like, I can't imagine playing 50 hours on a single, a single run of Mario, of the original Mario. And I don't even think that that was what, 86, 88?
Yeah, I think original.
I'm looking at 85, October of 85. The NES debuted in the United States.
Yeah, so like vaguely contemporary, but like this is a much more
Thank you, Wikipedia.
complex thinking game than
Sure.
a Mario or a Jumpman or whatever the other the arcade games that you could be playing at that time.
Yeah,
so
I think
it's going to scratch a different itch.
I think roughly at this era in the 80s, like the Atari 2600 was probably the most popular, but the NES was like skyrocketing to catch it. And by the end of the 80s, it was like NES or nothing. Like poor Commodore sitting under the desk was like a distant third or maybe fourth.
Yeah. I mean, I guess eventually like Zelda would come out, and that'd be your alternate fantasy type game.
Sure.
But even it's a very different game than that. Like your inventory management and magic and various stats and all that stuff. Like this is a different thing, and I could see getting deeply into it. Then, not now.
Let's maybe move to our next game, our, I believe, 1984 release of Hack. I feel like this one feels much more Rogue in that it is smaller. Like it's less visually complicated. We were also, because of the version that we were playing, it starts us off with like a default, I think the Oryx tile set, as well, which is kind of like visually bamboozling, going from the ASCII of Moria to like, oh my god, graphics with, it's almost like a jump scare. But in some sense, like I can kind of see the appeal of switching back to ASCII for Hack, specifically because it is like a simple, like, your dungeon rooms are just like big open squares, and there's just like one hallway kind of connecting one or the other. But notably, you start with a companion, you start with an ally. In this case, we all started with little puppies. And I don't remember if it's specific to the class, but you have also like weirdly like anachronistic classes in this one between like cavemen or speleologists or...
I'm not up to date on what speleology is.
It's a cave scientist.
What?
Yeah. Maybe in reference to Colossal Cave Adventure.
Could be.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're all supposedly going into
Oh, like
caves
Spelunky. Oh my god,
yeah.
we're back to Spelunky. Oh god.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think Hack generally is like Rogue, but with more stuff, and because developed by high school students, like basically all these games were, or college students, feels more dialed back and less huge in scope than Moria, but maybe more approachable.
Intriguing. The map absolutely looks a lot more visually similar to Rogue, as you say. Like it's a rectangle. Each floor is a nice. It's a wider rectangle, but like even just the way that the
rooms connected by passageways versus
precisely.
Moria is more freeform cave system.
Quite, and I was happy to see that Hack, of course, has Q for quaff. Very important. We really need to bring that back into modern roguelikes. What struck me about Hack is because, and I think the reason for this is because you have a companion, and that's adding another sort of dimension to the gameplay and the randomness, the random things that can happen in the game. This was the first of the games that we played today where I was like, oh, this has an element of that emergent story that I look for in a truly great roguelike experience. That like there is a emerging narrative. And in this case, I mean, it was pretty simple, but I had my little dog with me. Dog's on autopilot, attacking things, fighting. Sometimes he'd, disappear for a period of time. I'd be like, oh no, where's my dog? At one point, I could not find the dog. Turns out, dog had fallen down a trapdoor. And then I fell down the same trapdoor. And then, at last, I'm reunited with my dog, thank goodness. But then in the very next battle, I was blinded by a gnome. And I fought and I battled and I could hear, oh, there's a fight happening, but what is going on? And then I'm feeling around the chamber. The sound of the fight has stopped. The dungeon room is quiet. And I'm feeling around, blinded by the gnome's magic. And what's this? The next message is, you feel the corpse of a dead dog. Oh, no! And my eyesight comes back, and I've lost my poor companion. And that is a tragic story, and something similar happened to me in CUD. But, that is a critical part for my traditional roguelike experience, is that there are enough moving parts and enough randomness that you get that narrative that is spontaneously formed. And I thought that was neat to see in Hack. What did anyone mess around with the magic in Hack? I did not.
I've played around with it a bit because I feel like the only class that made sense to me was the wizard. Because all the other ones, I'm just like, I have no idea what an archaeologist is doing in this game. Like cavemen, I don't know if they start with magic, but the wizard class almost kind of feels like you're starting like a turn-based, tile-based run of Noita in a way, because you start with wands and they do different stuff. But yeah, what about the magic?
Oh, I was just curious what it's like.
Yeah, I think like if you start with the wizard class.
I tried to use magic and then I got killed.
Oh,
classic. But yeah, if you start as the wizard class, you start with a few wands or staves that give you options to like. And I think you're also incredibly weak, so you are incentivized to just like zap stuff with your wand constantly.
Oh, right. What's the button?
Z for zap.
Yeah.
Z for zap, folks.
Also something we could bring back.
Dedicated zap.
I wouldn't say no.
But yeah, I think it's like, instead of scouring the dungeon, like if you are just a knight class or something, you're scouring the dungeon. Oh, finally, I found a wand to do something as like a ranged weapon. Mm-hmm. You're just starting with it. And so like that gives you, I think, more options to kind of like... I'm guessing that like starting as a wizard class in Hack or NetHack is kind of playing on easy mode to some degree, because you're already starting with that, like maybe glass cannoning a little bit. But yeah, I think it definitely felt more initially intelligible than Moria, because in Moria you have to open a book, you have to read a book, you have to start learning spells, and then once you have learned the spell, then I think you have to like do some other menu command in order to cast said spell. Mm-hmm. Versus Hack felt more streamlined, where it's just like, yeah, you just zap the thing.
Right. Yeah. Totally. That is appreciated. Having to wield the book, and then speaking of Moria, what do we think Will would have thought about that game?
Yeah,
is he much of a Tolkien head?
Is Will a big Tolkien freak? No.
Of course, Andrew, am here, and then Scott and Colin are here, but Will didn't want to put up with these old janky games. He's too busy making his own game.
I mean, we're bought a house recently, moving. We're like, which copies of our various Tolkien books are we keeping? Like, well, I have the illustrated hardback version of the Silmarillion, and yours is only paperback. So, my household is a Tolkien household.
Well played.
So I could say that none of them are really that much like.
Well, you can take this home to your, to your beloved, to your fiance, and you two can sit down and maybe like co-op some runs of Moria. But enough about Moria. Sorry. Hack. So Hack, I kind of assumed that it might be, since it birthed NetHack. I thought maybe this is a sci-fi game. But no, we're just referring to the hacking and slashing that one does as you're dungeon crawling. Yes. These are all fantasy titles.
No computer hacking involved. I do appreciate that this version of Hack that we played, a very rudimentary version, doesn't feel like it's overwhelming with content about, like, because with NetHack, as far as, well, there's tile-based versions of NetHack that you can play. Mostly they're ASCII-based. But Colin, last week you said something about how wouldn't it be fun to have Rogue as a mini game in something? NetHack one of the dungeon branches that you can go down is just a literal full 25 floor playthrough of the original Rogue.
Cool.
So,
great.
I don't think that's in this one that we played today, but
Yeah, probably. I mean, this is regular hack, not net hack.
true.
So.
Yeah, it hasn't had 40 years worth of nightmarish tech debt crufted over in a layer cake of yes-anding with design choices. So I think like this version of hack is fine. Should we move on to our next favorite game of Larn?
Certainly.
So Larn, 1986, I believe, is a more of a coffee break roguelike game, something that you can probably beat in closer to 30 minutes to an hour. And this one I think is interesting because it's playable on Larn.org. See the very nice listener letter that was sent in to us from the maintainer of Larn.org.
Oh my goodness! Thank you. What a deal.
And I think that it still feels very playable. I think color goes a long way. It's not as visually busy as Moria is. You can also, it's weird that like despite all these games being ASCII, you can definitely tell one from another from across the room. Where like
the games
there's
one from
ASCII and
another.
there's ASCII. I feel like does actually encompass a broad range of tile sets within that. Like there's the ones that these are just literally the things that you can see on the keyboard versus you're starting to add like they're within a tile but you gotta get some texture to them.
Yeah. And Larn, the 10 floor normal dungeon feels very compact and small in scope, but again, you're on a fixed time limit because you're poisoned daughter. But
yeah, this game opens up with a proper storyline and proper motivation for why you are going dungeon delving. Whereas like almost every other one of the games that we've been playing for this the episode 100 Bonanza, like most of those games, the goal is go into dungeon, get gold, get XP, so that you can be the best dungeon gold man or woman or person.
And they don't even tell you that. They're just like, there is a statue at the bottom.
Right, yeah. Or there's one specific, item at the bottom of the dungeon.
Like, what's my motivation for trying to find the Amulet of Yendor? Like, it exists.
Quite. So in this game, instead it starts up and it's like, yo, this is why you got to go into this horrible dungeon that no one would actually want to go to in real life. It's because your daughter is sick and there's a magical potion in there that could cure her. And to your point, Scott, this game, because there's a hard time limit, your run length is significantly shorter and is much more practical than the 50 hours required for Moria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it feels like there's just a lot of stuff you encounter. It feels like there's just... It feels much more generous. It feels way easier, but I'm okay with that. It's not impossibly easy in that, like,
this is the one that has a straight up difficulty setting too. So
with the 100 difficulty levels.
Yeah.
Which
wow.
I think I can appreciate if you're just like, I'm a solid Larn 78 level player, and that feels just about right for me. Versus like booting up Hack or Moria and then walking 3 steps and rocks fall and you die, and that's it.
Yeah, 2 kobolds steal your lunch money and pants you. Jeez.
How do we feel about the D&D store in Larn? I feel like that kind of...
That's the location name.
Yeah.
You start in the main town and, what's this? The merchant shop? No, D&D store. How do I feel about it? I couldn't afford nothing there.
Just like a real D&D store for me, anyway.
Yep.
Yeah, I think like it kind of underlines the silliness to the game a little bit of like how it's maybe like a little more irreverent of a tone and not taking itself as seriously as the other games.
And I did 2 runs. My first run, I got killed by a bat in the town square. That's fun. Again, that emerging narrative. We love that. I go. My first move was to go and visit the home and see my sick daughter. I'm like, don't worry, dear. Papa will be back with the magic potion. And then literally walk out the door and assailed by a bat dead. Very funny. And then my second run, I got killed by an Umber Hulk. The classic Dungeons and Dragons monster, the Umber Hulk, which I feel like has not made it into as many video games, so I was happy to see that.
Umber Hulk's cool.
Yes, I concur. Not enough of them. We need more quaffing. We need more zapping, more Umber Hulks. What other Dungeons and Dragons stuff is in this game?
Well, you have a volcano. That's your shorter turbo experience, but
you can. Yeah, there's the main dungeon, or there is the super hard only 5-level dungeon, a shorter dungeon, harder dungeon.
There's a lot
that
of
you can jump
thrones.
into.
There's a lot of thrones in this one.
Oh yeah,
it's a literal game involving thrones.
Yes. So
you can. One of the action items is specifically to.
There's a specific button for sit on throne. There's a specific button for remove gems from throne. There's a specific button for bathing in a fountain. And apparently there's mechanics for this, Scott, you're telling us?
Well, yeah, I think that at least from Hack, because NetHack, possibly also in Hack, elaborate god systems, I think possibly also in Larn as well, fountains are usually associated with gods or deities. I went and donated a bunch of gold. I think I had 1,000 gold. I donated 400 at one of the fountains.
Wow.
And it was you have been heard, and then I was blessed with some sort of good status condition for a brief amount of time. So
neat.
there are ways.
Maybe that god could have cured your daughter. Oh, nice.
The gods of Larn work in mysterious ways.
Quite. So yeah, again, these extra elements of instead of just being a dungeon crawler, now there are gods. Now there are god altars that you can visit, and just adding these extra elements, I love to see, because then that increases the complexity of the randomness, and there's more of a potential story because there's just more variables involved, which love to see. Indeed. And of course, just like our previous game, Hack, I think that Will would love Larn. I'm pretty confident that after he gets over his RuneScape binge, bender, he's probably going to be all Larned up. I'm pretty confident.
Yeah,
100%. But yeah, that maybe will transition us to our final game to talk for this evening. 1987's Omega, which I feel like there's a certain class of geekdom that maybe a lot of people have heard of NetHack, maybe fewer people have heard of Moria, but you'll get some more street cred. I feel like if you've played either Larn or Omega or both in this case, you have ascended to an extra level of super geekdom. Wow. You have played some pretty obscure games that, honestly, have some pretty interesting charm to them. Omega, I was pleasantly surprised by with just, booting it up and just, this intro sequence that you have of effectively your player character getting sucked into your computer and being instilled into this ASCII fantasy world.
Yes.
But
it's rather meta in that way, because it starts with you have a project due and you got to finish your program, and then it's you stumble across some files and it's what's that kooky crazy old Omega team up to? Let me go boot up their file, and then whoa, you get isekai'd into the fantasy realm. Again, I thought this is going to be a science fiction game. None of these, except for Star Trek, of these old school games that we've been playing for the Bonanza, unless I'm forgetting one, they're all fantasy games, which is interesting. And I'm starting to wonder, in order to be a traditional roguelike game, does it have to be fantasy?
No, I don't think so, because, again, one of the listener letters that has written in, Jeffrey Olson, the developer of Alpha Man, which came out, I think, 91.
No, that's a game Will would like.
Especially because it takes place in modern times. It's a very, open-world, contemporary roguelike.
I joke. No, it's contemporary.
Doom RL.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's true. Well, I realize. Could an argument be made, if you wanted to be a real purist, that all of these foundational roguelike games, they're all fantasy, and if it ain't fantasy, it ain't a traditional roguelike.
True, and if you wanted to take it one step further, it has to be a roguelike if it can only be played on a PDP-11 mainframe that weighs at least 1,000 pounds. Running on magnetic tape.
It's a hypothetical question, but interesting. Of course we have very many great examples of modern traditional roguelikes that are sci-fi and whatever else have you, what have you. Right, Omega, yeah, you're isekai'd away. I didn't play it for a super long time, but there's a set of controls for in town, and there's a set of controls for being in the wilderness.
Yes.
So we have a separate set of hotkeys, which I thought was kind of interesting, but also kind of annoying.
Yeah, I think that kind of underlines this game in a nutshell. Interesting but annoying. There's like this big overwhelming town that you kind of roll through, which feels very visually busy like Moria does, but once you kind of visually understand the systems, it's okay. But there's a lot going on. Like, again, a solo dev game. It's a big sprawling open world that has multiple different towns, multiple dungeons, but if you take one wrong step at any point without searching, you step on a trap and you're just instantly dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, and the developer, which of course, whose name is on the menu screen, Lawrence R. Brothers. I glanced at that at first and I thought, a pair of brothers made this game? Wow, that's neat. But no, one individual, and we commend all of our solo devs. We also commend the wonderful keeper of the Larn website. Thank you for writing in. But that's also a reminder to thank all of the wonderful keepers, the historians who are keeping all of these games available and playable, and thank you kindly. But back to Omega. There is a lot going on, Scott, as you said, and I was quite intrigued and interested and surprised to see that when I was in the first town and I go to talk to a guard, which you told me to press T for talk. I did not do that. Instead, I directioned into the guard, and it asked yes or no. Do you want to? I'm like, of course, yes. And I accidentally attacked the guard and then was killed immediately on the spot. I just got here. I just teleported in and dead.
Stop right there, criminal scum.
But the point is, when you do talk to them, there is a dialogue system of sorts. There are several different modes of speaking. I think I wrote them down somewhere, but it's like you can greet, you can threaten, you can surrender, and then I think if you just back out of it, it's like slink away or something like that, something funny. So yeah, there does seem to be a lot happening. Why do you think we don't hear so much about Omega?
I think it's partially because of its obscurity. Like 1987 was when NetHack started, and so it may have just been completely eclipsed by that. But like Moria, was popular, gave birth to Angband, I think in the early 90s, and then that started to eclipse it. And I don't really know where you would be able to find stuff about Omega outside of Usenet, which was already pretty niche at the time. So there was some activity on Usenet for Omega specifically, but I think it's just the brutal randomness that if you take one wrong step somewhere in a dungeon, boom, your run is over.
Oof.
Well, and I don't know if you would hear that much about Moria or Hack if they hadn't spawned other things.
That's also true. Yeah.
Them on their own, probably not that heard of. It's their lineage that you're...
Their rogue legacy, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
Whoa.
I mean, even the same with Rogue. It's all about tracing back of, I liked this game. What did that was inspired by this, was inspired by this, was inspired by this, was directly branched off of this. And then you get back to Rogue.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think just because there's so much stuff in Omega that it's it's so hard to see and experience all that stuff. I don't know. I would guess maybe there's less than 100 people that have beaten Omega. If I had to guess from a gut check of how popular it was at the time and how its legacy has evolved and all that. So seeing all those systems and seeing how they evolve and stuff is hard to share for whoa, yeah, you should totally go back and check out this thing. I feel if there was it's also interesting that some of these other games maybe have tile options to them. If there was some tile option for Omega that I'm sure exists out there, but I've intentionally tortured my co-host this time with all ASCII bombardment.
ASCII bombardment,
specifically
that's a wonderful phrase.
For setting up for our third part here. But yeah, I think there's interesting stuff about Omega that's just yeah, and I think other games do it better.
Right.
Which is fine.
I see. I see. Well, I can say that it made a pretty positive impression. I will say, not to totally like dunk on this game from the brief time I played it. Pretty positive impression. Some interesting stuff.
It's got some good charm to it.
There also seem to be romance options because you are asked like, "What's your character's name?" But also, are you into guys or girls? What's the deal? What's one or the other? There's no other options. Which the fact that there even is an option to like ask about that, and it's not tied directly to your character's gender is honestly fairly progressive.
Shockingly ahead of the time.
Ahead of its time. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Omega, very interesting, very interesting. And I'm going to go ahead and, again, because Will isn't here, we have to just kind of postulate and guess what he would think of these games. I assume since there is a little bit of a cyberpunk sort of bend and sci-fi element to this game, that it's probably his favorite.
Oh, yeah.
Probably his favorite.
Definitely, and because it borrows so heavily from Oblivion the other way around. Yeah, I could see...
If Moria is Will's new Slay the Spire, then Omega is Will's Slay the Spire 2. I think that's safe to say, and we can all agree. Thank you. Everyone is nodding along, and we'll tell him that at the beginning of the next episode.
So do we have any final thoughts about like this first generation of unique roguelikes that have emerged in the wake of 1980 Rogue? How do we feel about ASCII? How do we feel about like the scope and length of these games as general first impressions?
I want to wait until after we play Brogue because I feel like we really did only touch, especially on this second batch, 25 minutes into Moria is not playing Moria in a way that like the people who've played it for a long time or like
you barely even had time to say speak friend and enter.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it'll be interesting to see the final evolution of it at Brogue or NetHack.
Indeed, Colin. There will be more to say about these old games once we play a more sophisticated and modernly tuned version of such a game. I will say, I've already mentioned sort of this again, emerging narrative concept that I so love about this genre. And I already mentioned that, but I'll also mention that, playing these games, it's really obvious to me, like, oh, yeah, I can totally see how this really grabbed hold of people and captured their imagination and inspired, an entire genre and also inspired an entire several generations of really passionate game developers who wanted to make games in this avenue, this type, this genre, and build up the genre and improve it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to wind down our episode 2 out of our 3-episode mega bonanza here celebration.
You're upgrading it to a mega bonanza? Holy moly! We're on the second episode. By episode 3, this is going to be
our Omega bonanza. And so to play us out from this episode will be a very Tolkien appropriate level of music featuring another band of adventurers who have befallen afoul of some demon of the deep and potentially a wizard class falling to yet another stupid death.